live, Kim. Oh, live on Facebook.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Yaditza Mendez, Associate Director of Organizing at Make the Road New York. Thank you everyone for joining us today to learn more about DACA. We will be starting momentarily. We will be taking a few more moments to allow additional folks to join in. Thank you everyone so much for joining. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Mi nombre es Yaritza Méndez, vicedirectora del Departamento Organizativo con SEACE Camino en Nueva York. Muchas gracias por unirse a nosotros el día de hoy para conocer un poquito más sobre DACA. Este evento estará facilitado en español. Por ende, si necesita interpretación, por favor llamar al número que está en la pantalla. Para aquellos en la línea de Zoom, por favor seleccionar el globo en la parte de abajo y elegir el canal que dice español. Una vez más, esta presentación se va a estar haciendo en inglés. Si necesitan interpretación al español, por favor llamar a la línea para interpretación al 1-844-844-9200 con el código 472-681. Y también, por favor, recuerden enviar un mensajito de texto al número de teléfono 929-410-5280 con el código E432 para saber que está con nosotros el día de hoy. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We will be starting momentarily, allowing folks to join in. This workshop is going to be facilitated in English. If you do need interpretation into Spanish, please dial the number on your screen. For those joining us today, we also would like to encourage everyone to send a text to 929-410-5280 and with the code E432. We will be starting shortly.
Hola, buenas tardes. ¿Cuál es para el español, perdón?
Hola, buenas tardes. Para tener acceso a la interpretación al español, por favor, llamar al número 1-844-844.
9200.
Exactamente. Y con el número de código 472-681 y el signo de número.
Ok, muchas gracias.
Pero si usted está conectada en el Zoom, solamente va a haber un globo en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y si ve ese globo, solamente seleccionarlo y después elegir el canal donde dice español y automáticamente va a estar recibiendo la interpretación al español.
Ok, sí, yo estoy conectada en el Zoom.
Okay, great. So with that, we're going to get started on our Facebook Live. Thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. Once again, my name is Yaritza Mendez, Associate Director of Organizing at Make the Road New York, pronouns she, her, ella. I have the privilege of being part of this amazing organization since the age of 14. Actually, through our Youth Power project, that's where I first started my inspiration to doing community organizing, and I'm super excited to be a part of this forum this afternoon. We have all fought in the streets and in the courts to be able to bring DACA back, and we have actually won. It is amazing to be here with all of you and know that DACA is now accepting new applications. The fight to keep DACA has been one that has taken a number of years. We have a very dynamic panel with us today. We will be able to hear a little bit about the DACA history and the context. We will hear the testimony from one of our amazing youth. And then we will have some of our legal experts from the organization that are going to be talking to us about how people are able to apply for DACA and what are the resources available out there.
Perdón, no se escucha en español.
We will then pivot to some Q&A. And of course, we'll be doing a closing.
Sí, ahora.
In the meantime, I do encourage everyone to text E432 at the number 929-410-5280, so that we know that you're here with us today. With that, I'm gonna kick off the event and start with our panelists. And I would like to pass it on to Natalia Aristizabal, who is now a campaign director for immigrant justice at Center for Popular Democracy, who will be sharing with us some of the key points on the history and organizing around DACA. Natalia, welcome, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Jadi, and thank you to the Youth Power Project for having me as a special guest. This fight has been very dear to my heart, as some of you may know, and for those of you who may not know, again, my name is Natalia Aristizabal. I'm with the Center for Popular Democracy, but Make Their Own New York is my movement, home, and my family. I started in this organization about 16 years ago and was there for 15 years till moving to now the sister org, Center for Popular Democracy. So I'm here to talk about sort of the history, hi Marcy, the history of DACA, which has not been an easy fight and also has been a fight that has been led directly by people impacted, young people in the US, young immigrants of all backgrounds. And so I first want to say that DACA is possible because young people made it possible. And that's a very important thing to highlight today. So the way, and I'm gonna start with the slide. I don't know if we can, I'm not seeing if we're doing the slide share yet. We are, okay, great. So in 2012, after a long fight, we were able to win something very substantial, but it wasn't possible if it wasn't because a lot of people decided to sort of pivot the strategy. So 2010, we were fighting for the Federal Dream Act, which was actually a path to citizenship, and we failed. And then after a lot of us feeling we were angry, we were upset, but we were not gonna stop fighting, we reconvened and we tried to figure out the different ways that we can push, and we started pushing to stop deportation. At that time, for young people living in the US who were brought here by their parents. And so after a long 2 years fight, but actually that was building on the DREAM Act, on June 15 of 2012, President Obama, after a lot of pressure, announced that he was going to make Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, a program that would provide young people a path to a working permit and to a Social Security. So one very important and key thing about DACA is that folks are still undocumented, but it means that the government knows that they're here. And I'm going to slow down for interpretation. That it means that the government knows that they're here and they are not a threat of deportation, and they can have a work permit while they figure out how to adjust their status. That's kind of what DACA means. Next slide. So, sorry. So we had DACA, we had a lot of people applying to it, and the government, and we kept on pushing to expand it. So again, under the Obama presidency on 2014, we were able to obtain a DACA expansion. At that time, we called it DACA Plus, and DAPA, which is the For Action for Parents. And what that was doing was expanding who was going to be able to have access to this work permit and this social. But unfortunately, the anti-immigrant sentiment in this country has always been very vibrant. I know that a lot of us can remember the last 4 years because we were under a Trump administration, but it has been happening since the history of this country. And so Texas, together with 26 other states, sued the government. And through that lawsuit, they were able to stop the expansion of DACA, and not only for more young people to be able to apply, but for parents who at that time were going to qualify. So that happened in 2014, more or less. In 2016, sorry, I'm getting my dates. Yeah, 2015, I'm sorry. In 2016, a very courageous young person, member of Make Their Own New York, decided to take a very courageous step together with a very creative legal team, Make Their Own New York, and other folks nationwide, NILC, and forgetting the last law school, were able to come together and figure out a lawsuit. And they said, we're going to sue the government because we are going to show that what they're doing is doing a great damage to our community. And so in New York, they submitted a lawsuit sort of fighting what the Texas court had done. The very courageous young man, which I still have contact with him till now, and he's still very much part of the fight, is Martin Batalla Vidal, and the lawsuit that went all the way to the Supreme Court has his name, which I am very proud of and very proud to know him. So while this fight is happening, we have a new presidency, right? At the end of 2016, we see the elections. A lot of us are devastated. January 20th of 2017, President Trump, who was also president number 45, and continuing this conversation, I will refer to him as president number 45, decided to attack Daca. And he said that Daca was unconstitutional and that he was going to stop the program altogether. Because Make the Road, who, by the way, has been fighting on this and leading the fight, not only as like a participant, but leading the fight nationwide, adjusted the lawsuit that they had to say, not only did you take out Daca and DAPA, like Daca expansion and DAPA, but now you're trying to take the original program, which is Daca, and that we do have proof to show how it's going to harm the community. And we're also going to show that the president is acting, President 45 at that time, is acting with biases and racism against the immigrant community. That court case went, next slide, that court case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It went to the different levels. And it was in January of 2018 that, nationwide, there's different districts of courts. So while in New York, we have the Batalla Vidal case fighting, and that eventually makes it all the way to the Supreme Court. There's also, the Texas case that I mentioned. So now we're going to mention the California case. And in January 2018, a judge in California also blocked that Daca could not be terminated. And so we had two courts saying that DACA needed to stay as a program, and then the court in the South saying that it needed to end. And that's kind of what makes it go all the way to the Supreme Court. However, the continuous fight of both court cases of New York and California makes it that even though you couldn't apply as a new person, so everything was sort of complicated, it meant that people who currently had the program were able to keep the program and continue renewing. And so for a really long time, we had no new applicants because it, sort of by law, if you may, or by judge orders, you couldn't have new people, but you could have the people who currently had DACA continue to renew their status. So now we move forward to sort of November 2019, which feels like last year, but also feel like 10 years ago because of the pandemic. And in November of 2019, is when the Supreme Court decides that they're going to have oral arguments. And so this was the 12th of November. A lot of you may remember that a lot of us were making fuss. I'm wearing this like beanie from Home is Here, which was a campaign nationwide that was created to do a campaign to defend DACA to our best ability. And for example, with Make Their Own New York, in NACASEC, we walked all the way from New York to DC to demand that the judges paid attention to sort of the environment right now and realize that DACA is an essential program for the immigrant community, not only for DACA recipients, but for the whole family. And it was important for us as an immigrant movement to defend that fight. And so 12th of November of 2019, we go in front of the Supreme Court. Young and undocumented people, including Martin, were able to be inside of the court to hear the arguments and see how the case was being defended and attacked. And then we move forward to last year in June 2020, when the Supreme Court ruled in favor of DACA recipients and immigrant families. I'm getting emotional. To finally say that DACA recipients had the right to keep the program and that the government was acting in a very biased way. And so we are able, together with the movement, to win this and hold this for community members, for DACA recipients. And I'm getting emotional because I'm remembering what it was to like see people exit in the court, what it was to have been in the front of this fight year after year, and realize that the government was trying to continue to attack us in many ways. And I want to say that, like, again, it wasn't under the Trump administration. There's a lot of people who are anti-immigrant and who want to hurt us, but I think year after year, what they showed us is that we have huge strength in community, huge strength in numbers, and they have not been able to take down DACA because of our community work, because of our movement work, and because while we may not have money, we have people power, and that is a very important thing to remember. So July 28th of 2020, the Trump administration again tried to attack DACA by saying, in a new crafty way, well, we're going to end DACA again, regardless of all the effort and all the fight and all the stuff that we had been sort of fighting, and made me get a little emotional just now. But again, the Batalla Vidal case of legal case kept on fighting every sort of step of the way and every attack from the Trump administration. And so finally, in December 4th of 2020, in the court in Brooklyn, the judge again says that DACA needs to be restored to its original beginnings, that everything that the administration had been doing sort of was wrong, and again gave a ruling in favor of the immigrant community. And the Batalla Vidal versus Wolf, which is what the case finally was called, we won it. And so because of that ruling on December 4th of 2020, is that not only is DACA in place, but new applicants currently can apply after having a hold of about 3 years where new applicants were not being welcome or were not allowed to apply, let's just say that. Now, anybody who can qualify for the DACA as a program can apply. And so this means that now new applicants can send their, or new participants can say, or people can send their new application, making sure that obviously that they can qualify. And we're going to go into that later on. That also means that advanced parole, which is a special permission for people who have DACA, are able to travel outside. And that basically everything that we fought for in the original program has been restored and has been put back to place. Also in this process, there was a point where DACA recipients were only able to renew their DACA for 1 year. This ruling meant that DACA recipients were able to go back to renewing their application only every 2 years. For folks who may not know, DACA costs about $500. It's a little less, but it's about $500 to renew your application. So it was really important that we went back to every 2 years. And I am not sure if I'm doing the eligibility, but I think that might be actually the lawyers. So thank you all for having me here and for allowing me to go down memory lane with all of you. I know that all this like DACA stuff, that it was in the court and it wasn't in the court and we won and then we didn't win. It's kind of complicated, but it's kind of the way that like life happens here in the system, continues to try to play with our lives. And I think the important message here, again, I'm going to say this again and again, and if we ever talk off screen, I continue to say it. These victories are won by people like you and myself who believe in justice and who believe that we together can make changes. And I know sometimes it seems hard. And I just talked about basically 8 years in this fight or 9 years in this fight just for DACA, which is a program that currently helps about 800,000 people. Originally was meant to help 1.5 million people. But even a program that helps only a subset of the undocumented population in the US has been a strong fight. But every day is going to be worth defending it because we need to keep it in place so we can win more relief for all undocumented people living in the US, and as the sign says, for citizenship for all. So thank you all for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Natalia, for your insight and of course your leadership over the last God knows how many years, and for being the immigration mom to a lot of us who are at the moment doing this work. Una vez más quiero recordarles a las personas que están uniéndose a nosotros de por favor llamar al número 1-844-844-9200 con el código 472-681 y el signo de número. Estaríamos continuando con la conversación sobre DACA en inglés. Y es sumamente importante para los que necesiten la interpretación que llamen a ese número para recibirla. Para los que se están uniendo a nosotros a través de la línea de Zoom, solamente tendrían que buscar el globito en la parte de abajo de su pantalla y seleccionar el canal en español. Once again, just wanted to remind everyone, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. We will continue our conversation on DACA in the fight and what it has meant over the last couple of years, and for the youth that are not able to apply again to be able to get some sort of relief for 2 years. Encouraging everyone that if you do need interpretation into Spanish, to please dial the interpretation line just to make sure that you're able to receive the information in Spanish. Also encouraging people that are tuning in with us today to continue sending your questions on the comment on Facebook. And if you're joining us through Zoom, to do that also through the chat. I know that there's some questions about how to get help with your application and what resources are there. So we promise to close the loop with you before the end of the live. But keep those questions and concerns coming in. We will make sure to have some time to respond to them before the end of the day. With that, I want to continue with the rest of our programming, and I now would like to welcome one of our leaders with our Youth Power Project, our amazing Daniela Garcia, who is going to talk to us briefly about her testimony and specifically what it means for her to have or apply for DACA right now. Daniela, welcome.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Daniela and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a youth leader in the Youth Power Project at Make the Road, New York. I was born in Puebla, Mexico, and at the age of 2, I immigrated to the United States with my family. When I was 15, I had the opportunity to submit my DACA application. I was excited at the idea of finally having protection from deportation and being able to have legal employment. Most of all, I was relieved to know I would be like any other youth in my school. My dreams were shattered when Trump's administration rescinded DACA and my application was denied. One of the hardest parts of all of this was knowing that I was only a few months away from my application being accepted. When I was in high school, a girl I knew told me that she had applied for DACA when she turned 15 and she was able to get approved. The difference between us is that her birthday was a couple of months before mine. So her application was approved before DACA was rescinded. Those couple of months meant a world of difference. Everyone around me was growing up and hitting milestones, and I felt stunted. I couldn't get my permit or a driver's license. I couldn't work. I couldn't even get financial aid when I applied to college. Even now, I feel like I'm too old to not have a formal job or have any type of documented work experience. I know that the fight for immigrant justice in this country has been happening for many decades, but the openness to which Trump hated immigrants and Mexican immigrants in particular, calling us rapists, drug dealers, and criminals, instilled a lot of fear and uncertainty in my family and my community. The rhetoric about building a wall and deporting all undocumented people was terrifying, and I thought there would be no future for me in this country. Joining together with people in my community, like everyone involved in Make the Road, helped me realize that hope was not lost, but that we needed to fight harder to make the changes we wanted to see for ourselves and our families. I remember one of the first rallies I went to was opposing Trump's zero tolerance policies that promoted immediate prosecution and detention of undocumented immigrants. My sister and I joined that protest against these federal policies and simultaneously gathered support within that rally for a potential New York state law that now grants driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. After that rally, I began joining the Youth Power Project meetings, where I had the opportunity to connect with people my age who were fighting for dignity and justice. Participating in these conversations opened my eyes to all the different issues that my community was facing, and it also allowed me to think more critically about the solutions collectively to build power, take action, and work through these issues. Living life undocumented is hard. I live in a constant fear that one day law enforcement can show up and rip my family apart. I cannot receive federal college aid. I cannot vote in any election. And during these hard times of the COVID-19 pandemic, my family didn't qualify for the federal stimulus check. So we tried to make it through as best we could. Despite all of the really hard things, I am happy and proud that my parents brought me here. My family and I have a home, and I'm doing everything in my power to receive a good education. Everyone here at Make the Road and people across the country have fought relentlessly in the courts and in the streets to restore DACA. And as a result, I was able to send out my DACA application to the United States Citizen and Immigration Services last week. The fight isn't over, and I will continue working hard so that my parents' sacrifices and the sacrifices of immigrants before us are not in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I do want to thank you for being in space with us today and for sharing such a powerful testimonial and representation, not only for yourself, but as well as speaking on behalf of your family members. And I'm sure and on behalf of a lot of the youth across the country that are also facing the same barriers that you just highlighted through your amazing testimony. Thank you again so much for fighting alongside with us, and not only for the current the current generation, but also thinking in the future for the further generation as well. Now we would like to pivot and hear a little bit from some of our legal colleagues here at Make the Road New York. They're going to talk to us briefly about some of the requirements for youth to be able to apply for DACA and what resources are available out there. I know that we have gotten some questions already through Facebook and through the Zoom chat. So we want to encourage people to continue dropping those in. And as I mentioned before, we will take the time to ensure that we are answering those questions before we wrap up the live today. With that, I want to do a welcome to Xiomara, Andrea, and Diana, who are going to talk to us more about DACA and some of their qualifications.
Thank you, Yari. So thank you also, Daniela, for that powerful, I share the same as Yaritza. I think you're courageous to be able to share your story. And we're so thrilled that you were able to finally send your application last week. So just wishing you all the best. So now, what about if, you also find yourself in a similar situation like Daniela, right? So today, along with Diana and Andrea, we're going to go over DACA 101. And so this is just a roadmap to sort of help you see where we're going to be guiding you in this workshop. So first, we're going to discuss about DACA eligibility. So am I eligible to apply for DACA? What makes me eligible? Then we're going to be discussing about what are some of the evidence or some of the proofs or what we call document gathering stage that you will need to start thinking about before you're able to apply. We're also going to be discussing what about I'm eligible, I have the documents, but I've had contact in the past, I've had criminal contact in the past. Am I able to still apply? And we'll discuss a little bit about that. And we'll also be talking about what if in the past I've also had a previous removal order, or I just don't know if I have a removal order because I don't know if I was in front of a judge. And the last thing that we're going to discuss, like Natalia described, advanced parole, it's an amazing mechanism to be able to travel and be able to come back to the US. But there are some limited circumstances of when we can use advanced parole as a DACA recipient. So we'll touch a little bit about that as well. And we're also going to give, like Yaritza mentioned, some next steps. What do I do if I know I'm eligible? What resources do I have? And if I have questions, what do I do? So now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea, who's going to discuss with us DACA eligibility.
Thank you so much, CEO. So, antes de comenzar, quiero recordarles a todas las personas que tenemos interpretación en español. Este webinar está siendo transmitido en inglés. Entonces, por favor, para las personas que necesitan nuevamente interpretación en español, la línea de interpretación es tienen que llamar al número 844-9200 y el código que tienen que usar es el 472681 numeral. So now I'm going to talk about Daca eligibility. And so you can apply for Daca if you were under the age of 31 years old on June 15, 2012. If you arrived to the United States before reaching your 16th birthday, if you live continuously in the United States from June 15, 2007 to the present, and if you were physically present in the US on June 15, 2012, and at the time of filing for DACA. Next slide, please. Thank you. And you have no lawful status, meaning you entered without inspection, also known as IWI, or any legal immigration that you had expired on June 15, 2012. You are currently enrolled in school, including the GED program or the trade school Goodwill program, or have a high school diploma or GED certificate, or are an honorable licensed veteran of the United States Armed Forces. It's important to mention that an applicant can be enrolled in a public or private school or an education program assisting students in obtaining a regular high school diploma or in passing the GED program. And lastly, you have not been convicted of a felony, a significant misdemeanor, or 3 or more misdemeanors, and you do not pose a threat to national security or public safety. And please note that you have to be at least 15 years old to apply for DACA. And now I'm gonna pass it on to Diana, who is going to talk about the documents, evidence, and proof you need to provide to USCIS if you meet the DACA requirements.
Thanks, Andrea. So yeah, if you're eligible, there are several documents that you'll have to present to USCIS when you file your application, just to show that you meet all these requirements that Andrea just explained. So in this slide and in the next few slides, I'm going to briefly go over the documents that someone would need to apply for DACA for the first time. So the first thing that you will need to gather will be proof of age and identity. So for this, you can use a school ID card, a passport, a national ID card, which includes a cédula or a DUI or your consular ID from your country of origin, a birth certificate with photo identification, etc. The next thing that you will have to show is that you came to the US before you turned 16. So for this, you can show a passport with an admission stamp if that applies to you, Form I-94, I-95, or I-94W, again, if that applies to you, immunizations or medical records or US school records, etc. Pretty much, again, just showing that you were in the US before turning 16. And then the last thing on the slide is just proof of immigration status, again, if that applies to you. So for this, you can use Form I-94, I-95, I-94W if you have one, and with the expiration date of your authorized stay. Final order of exclusion, deportation, or removal issued before June 15, 2012, again, if that applies to you, because not everyone will have one. And if you entered without inspection to the US, that will just have to be noted on your forms or on the cover letter of your initial application. And next slide.
And then the next thing, and before I go on, I just want to take a quick moment to pause and just give a quick message in Spanish. Si apenas está conectando a esta llamada y necesitas la traducción de la presentación en español, por favor llame al número que está en la pantalla, que es el 844-844-9200 y hunde el código 472-681 y luego el numeral. Y si usted está usando Zoom, por favor hunde el globito que está en la parte de abajo de la pantalla y busque la interpretación. Okay. So the next thing that you'll have to show will be proof of your continued residence in the US from June 2007 up to present day or up until the day that you file. So that if you file now this year, that's going to be 14 years of evidence that you'll have to gather to show that you were in the US for 2007 to now. So for this, you could use your school records, medical records, rent receipts, leases, utility bills, employment or tax records, dated bank transactions, account records, pay stubs, dated purchase receipts. As long as these documents have your name and the year, or the date, that will be helpful. That will be helpful for you. So just make sure you'll have to get the 14 years up to now for these documents. If you went to school in the US, you can get your transcripts. If you have a bank account, you can also get your account statements. Sometimes they send you monthly statements and bills, and maybe you can start saving those as well. So in addition to those 14 years of physical presence that you'll have to gather, you'll also need to show physical presence around a very specific date, and that's June 15, 2012. So again, you can use any of the documents that I had just mentioned, as long as it's near June 15, 2012. The closer it is to that date, the stronger it will be to show you meet that requirement. And next slide. So to show that you meet the academic requirement, to show that you're currently enrolled in a school or a school program, or show that you have already completed the requirement, you can use either your school records. So this includes transcripts or report cards. If you already graduated from high school, if you already completed a GED program, then you can use your high school diploma from the US or a GED certificate or another certificate from another trade school program. And this last bullet doesn't apply to everyone, but if you were in the Coast Guard or the US Armed Forces, then you will have to show that you were that you were honorably discharged, an honorably discharged veteran from the Coast Guard or from the US Armed Forces. And for that, you will have to get the form DD-214, Certificate of Release or Discharge, and GB Form 22, Military Personnel Records, or military health records. But again, that's only if you were in the US Coast Guard or US Armed Forces. All right, so I'm gonna pass it back to Xiomara so she can just explain more about criminal contact.
Thank you, Diana. And so, you might think about, based on the eligibility, I am able to apply for DACA, but I in the past have had contact, whether I got ticketed, whether I got stopped, and I've had some form of criminal contact. So what do I do? In order for us to best assess, we do ask that you take a look to see whether you already have what we call a certificate of disposition, a COD, in order for us to be able to analyze it and just be able to consider whether or not this may be a factor to consider in applying, right? Because there are certain convictions that may affect whether USCIS in their discretion will deny your case or will approve it. So one way that we can help determine that is if we're able to review alongside with you the certificate of disposition. Now, normally you would be able to go to the criminal court where you had gone and asked there as far as like how you can obtain a certificate of disposition. We do have a note here that says that, right? Every borough manages their own applications, except for the court citation, which manages the applications for all of the boroughs, and that's in 1 Center Street in Manhattan. But what about if you're in Long Island or Westchester? Normally, depending on the court, whether you are looking at the Suffolk County Criminal Court or the NASA, you should go back to those courts and inquire about how you can obtain a COD. The same is true for wherever you were going into court. Beyond that, we would just tell you, now that you start gathering your documents, start looking at your CODs, if you have any, if this even applies. This might not even apply to you, but if you do have had, if you have had criminal contact in the past, we just ask that you also make sure to look for your certificate of disposition so we can analyze that alongside you. The next slide, please. The other question that we often get is, what if I have a previous removal order where a judge ordered me to be removed, deported, or I don't know if I have one, but I think I do because I never went to court, right? So people with removal orders are still eligible to apply. So even if you have a removal order or you think you have one, you know, this should not be a reason for you not to ask to see whether you are able to apply. And the reason we put that it's risky is, even though, you know, USCIS should not be sharing this information about, let's say, if you enter on your own or whatever the case is, you just need to know that, you know, we try to advise you when we do our one-on-one as far as what happened when you entered, who else came with you. But for your sake, you know, DACA protects you in that they cannot enforce that removal order. So please do not think that just because you might have a removal order, you're not able to apply for DACA, but that's still something that we would discuss on our one-on-one when we have our consultation. So what about if you do have one? What does that look like? You probably were small or too young to remember if, in fact, when you entered the US, if you were stopped by immigration. So one way that you probably could find out is having a conversation, right, with your family members or your loved ones that might know how that happened. They may know that you were stopped, and they may have what we look for, which is an A number. And with the A number, that's what identifies you. Immigration identifies you, and it's like your unique number. With that number, we can locate to see if there is anything in the system. Or what about if you do know? I actually do remember seeing an immigration judge, and we applied, but we got denied, and now I have a removal order. But you don't know when you got it. Again, if you have your A number, we have on the slide right now a 1-800 number where you can call and follow the prompts and find out if, in fact, you do have a removal order. So that's the 1-800-898-7180. Another easier way to find out if you're able to is by going to this link, and maybe someone from our team can copy and paste this link and drop it in the Zoom or somehow in the Facebook. If you visit this or Google EOIR automated case information, you're able to type in your A number there, and it will let you know if you do have a removal order or an immigration case. Lastly, if this is just too much and you're just like, I don't know how to get this information, like this A number, I don't know what the attorney is referring to, we are happy to share that our rapid response team at Make the Road New York is ready to help you. So if you call this number, 631-485-2562, again, if you call this number, 631-485-2562, and you ask to speak to Emmy Cantos, Monday through Friday from 9 to 5, she will be able to give you that assistance to find out, do I have a removal order? I don't know how to start. So if you, after following this, you can't still determine if you have, please give Emmy a call and she'll be able to assist you on that end. Also, at the end, we'll give you also what are the ways that we can also assist you here at Make the Road. Next slide, please. So before we give you some next steps, advanced parole, right? So Natalia mentioned how with the ups and downs of DACA being, you know, an active program and then having it been halted, advanced parole was also something that was under attack. So advanced parole is this ability to be able to apply to USCIS if you currently have DACA. So if you do not have DACA, this is not applicable to you. But if you are currently a DACA recipient and you're able to show through these 3 limited circumstances that you need to travel for a brief, you know, related reason of these kinds, then USCIS would grant you an advanced parole, and only then are you able to travel. If you travel outside of the US without advanced parole, that is an automatic termination of your DACA. So please do not travel without first consulting with an attorney or legal practitioner and discussing your options and thinking about advanced parole. Like we say there, DACA recipients may not travel outside of the US without first obtaining this advanced parole document. And what are the 3 reasons or circumstances which an advanced parole may be documented? So it could be for humanitarian reasons. It could be because you need to obtain medical treatment, you need to attend a funeral service for a family member, or visit a sick relative. There's also this educational component, right? Maybe you are in college, maybe you want to study abroad and you want to take advantage of this opportunity. Now, because of the Batalla Vidal case, this is now something that is, again, back in force, right? That if you can demonstrate that you need to study abroad or have an academic research, you can apply for this purpose. Or the third circumstance is for employment purposes, such as you are getting reassigned, your job is saying, okay, I need you to go to X country for X time to be able to determine X thing. So you need it for your employment. So, you know, we do have at Make the Road New York from time to time KYRs and advanced parole, because each of these reasons have to be documented, right? You can't just apply and say, I'm going for humanitarian reasons. Well, what is that humanitarian reason? There's some documents that we need to gather as well. And the last point here is traveling on advanced parole does not mean that you're traveling on vacation. So, just because you've heard in the past that when someone traveled on advanced parole, they probably went to the beach, doesn't mean that that's the, you know, one of the reasons you could tell USCIS, can you grant me advanced parole because I want to go on vacation? It has to be for these 3 limited circumstances, like I mentioned, either humanitarian, educational, or employment. Next slide, please. So I think we might have some time to go over the self-assessment. I've already started to notice we've gotten questions in the, you know, through Facebook, through the chat. Do I qualify for DACA? Or my child entered in 2007, can they qualify for DACA? So let's go over this self-assessment to help you determine whether I'm going to pretend like I'm a person interested in applying for DACA, and I want to know, can I apply for DACA? So the first question I'm going to ask, as Andrea pointed, you have to be 15 years of age or older in order to apply for DACA for first time. However, there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions, which we did not put on the slide, is if you're under 15 and you have a final order of removal, or you are in removal proceedings, that is an exception that can be made. But generally, you have to be 15 years or older to apply. So the first question, am I 15 years old or older today? Yes, I'm actually 18 years. Good. So yes to that first question. Is my date of entry before June 15, 2007? Yes, I actually came in 2001 in April. Okay, good. So far, it's good. Number 3, at the time of my entry, was I under the age of 16? Yeah, you know, I was actually 4 years old when I entered. Okay, so far, I'm hitting the marks as to, am I able to apply for DACA? The fourth question, was I in the United States on June 15, 2012? Yes, actually, since I entered in 2000, I never left the US. So yes, I was here in the US in 2012. Okay, good. So far, it's looking like I'm good. The next question, on June 15, 2012, did I have immigration status? Let me think about this one. Actually, when I first came into the US in 2000, I entered with a visa, but my mom told me it was only valid for 6 months, which means in 2012, I did not have lawful status. So yes, I did not have lawful status. So far, that's looking good. I didn't have lawful status because one of the requirements to apply for DACA is you're not in a lawful status. So good to that one. Number 6, I have not left the country, or I just left briefly before August 15, 2012, but not after, right? Yep, like I said, I've never left the US. Okay, so far so good. It's looking like I'm qualifying for DACA. Number 7, I am, well, what about my school? I just graduated high school last year. So that means I can show proof that I have a high school diploma. So far, looking good. And how about the last one, right? Do I have a criminal record or criminal proceeding that may be disqualifying me? No, I don't have one. So far, based on these questions, it looks like I would be able to qualify. So what do I do now? So next slide, and next slide. Próximo slide. There you go. So what about if after this workshop, you guys determine, like I just did, that I qualify for DACA? So Diana, can you help me? Like, what do I do if I qualify, if I think I qualify for DACA based on the going through the self-assessment?
Right, thanks, Sia. So if you think you qualify for a DACA, please call Make the Road at one of the offices or one of the numbers listed here on the slide, just based off your geographic location, whichever is closest to you. So after you call the office, just let them know that you're interested in applying for DACA for the first time. Once you let them know, our team is going to place you on a waiting list, just because at the moment there are a lot of folks who are eligible and who are interested in applying also for the first time. So we have a wait list at the moment. So once you're on the wait list, one of our volunteers will reach out just to confirm if you're eligible or to screen your eligibility and see if you're eligible for DACA. And if you are eligible, then you'll receive a checklist of the documents that you'll need to provide. These documents are like the ones that I list. The documents on the checklist are the ones that I had explained a few slides earlier. And then once you start gathering your documents and you've got your documents, you've gone through the checklist, and you see that you have your documents ready, then you can email the address that's listed on that document checklist and let them know you have your documents ready. And then you'll be in contact with someone just to review your forms, to review the documents. Once you have all your documents in order, then you'll be set with an appointment with someone from the legal department. And I'll pass it back to Xiomara so she can explain the last part.
Yeah, thank you. So I've already also seen some questions that, you know, I've shared with the person. I do not think you qualify for DACA based on when you first entered the US, right? They entered in 2019. So unfortunately, you know, you would have to meet these eligibility in order to qualify for DACA. So what did I tell this person, right? You know, what happens if I don't think I qualify for DACA? Is there a place that I can go? So yes, if you think you do not qualify for DACA after doing this, you know, self-screening that we walked you through, you know, it is not lost for you. Andrea, what can a person in a situation that they might not qualify for DACA, what can they do, right? So Andrea, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, CEO. So if you are not eligible to apply for DACA, but you still want a consultation, we encourage you to schedule an appointment with an immigration attorney or an immigration expert. And if you are in New York City, please call the number 311. That's the Action NYC number. Again, the number is 311 if you are in New York City. And if you are outside New York City, meaning Long Island or Westchester or other county or city outside New York City, please call the number 1-800-566-7636. Again, if you are outside New York City, could be Long Island, Westchester, or other city, you can please call the number 1-800-566-7636. I'll pass it back to Sia.
Thank you. And that's all we have right now for legal. Obviously, this is a super fast, like KYR, DACA, do I qualify? So we encourage, if this, you know, if this is going to be recorded so you can look at it, but if you still have questions, do I qualify or not, please definitely take advantage of these numbers and call. You know, the worst you can do is just have a consultation, and the best that could happen is you realize that you do qualify and now you start that process. Or you may be eligible for a different relief, and that is not DACA, right? So we always just encourage you to take advantage of these numbers. Yari, te lo paso back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, CEO, Andrea, and Diana for such an amazing walkthrough to what is needed for someone to actually be able to apply for DACA. We are running a little bit behind schedule, and I know that Xiomara, Andrea, and Diana covered a lot of the questions that we got through the Zoom chat, as well as through the Facebook comments. So I just wanted to reiterate, it might be good if we can go back to the self-assessment cheat sheet that Xiomara and the rest of the legal team walk us through. Suleima, if you can help us with that, will be amazing. And I just want to encourage people,
to just like take a screenshot of that self-assessment questionnaire, so that you can just know right off the bat what are some of the things that you need to actually be able to qualify for DACA. Again, of course, you need to do this process alongside an immigration expert, someone who or a trusted attorney, right? Just to be able to get your documentations in order. But this is the self-assessment that I think will be super helpful and be able to answer some of the questions that we have gotten thus far. So I encourage everyone to please take either a picture or a screenshot of this self-assessment, so that you just know what are going to be some of the preliminary questions that you will be asked by someone within the legal field, just to make sure that you are able to actually apply for DACA. So we're going to leave this here for a moment, just to make sure that people are either gathering it or taking the picture, if that is the easier and quickest way to do so. To our legal team, to our amazing youth leader and Natalia, who also are here with us, want to also thank you, all of you again, for joining us and to walking us through the history of DACA and hearing about the testimonial and what it actually means to be able to have access to a program like this one, and the impact that it has on the youth that are able to benefit from it, but also their family members, right? Especially under the pandemic that we're living in. With that, I just wanted to go to the last couple of slides on our PowerPoint deck, and also take a moment to encourage just any youth that is out there, to the parents that are tuning in today, just listening in, and have children under in the ages between 14 and 24, to make sure that you're plugging in to our amazing Youth Power project with Make Their Own New York, and to be able to share space with youth like Daniela, and learn on how to actually make a difference in our community. In a moment, we're going to put up in the screen the email of Kendra, one of our lead organizers at Make the Road within the Youth Power Project, as well as her cell phone number, so that you're able to actually connect and ask any questions that you might have on how our Youth Power Project works, and what are some of the current campaigns that we're diving into. Our Youth Power Project does amazing work in Brooklyn, in Queens, and Staten Island, and Long Island, and very shortly in Westchester. And a lot of our sister organizations have also created a Youth Power Project to do a lot of the work that has a focus on youth and some of the impact that it has on their lives. So it's super important, again, encouraging either the youth and the parents that have youth between the age of 14 and 21 to please reach out to Kendra. And the email is here on your screens, as well as her cell phone number. So please do reach out to her to stay plugged in. Again, I want to thank our panelists for jumping on today and for sharing space with us. For everyone who tuned in, either through Zoom or through Facebook, thank you once again for jumping on. This recording is going to stay in our Make the Road website, so feel free to come back at a later point to be able to just hear some of the stuff that we just talked about, either the history or hearing testimonials like Daniela, or just knowing a little bit about what it is that is available out there in the next steps. So feel free to share this live as well with as many of your contacts as possible. With that, I want to end or wrap up this Facebook Live. Again, at Make the Road, we're super thankful to be able to share this information with our larger audience. And please stay tuned. Don't feel shy to reach out to us if you do have any questions or if you need support to get your DACA applications on the road. With that, stay safe, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Goodbye.